Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
You are sitting ringside with David Penzer on Radio Influence.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Sitting Ringside. My name is David Penzer, and we are happy, as always, that you are here to listen to this thing we call a podcast. Really excited about my guest this week. Going to get to him right away. Just want to remind you, by the way, if you want to follow us on social media, at David Penzer on Twitter or at Penzer Ringside. And if you are listening to this at a platform where you could leave reviews, we'd love to hear what you think about Sitting Ringside. And I think we have a fun guest this week. As a matter of fact, I know we do. Whether you know him as Daryl Van Horn, the Sinister Minister, James Vandenberg, or the father of Abyss, please welcome my friend and one of the most interesting people in professional wrestling, the one and only Jim Mitchell. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure how to introduce my guest this week. Should I call him the Sinister Minister? Should I introduce him as James Vandenberg, Father James Mitchell, or Daryl Van Horn, going back a little way there? I'll call him Jim Mitchell. That's his real name. And welcome to City Ringside, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just don't call me late for the orgy.
Here we go, right off the start. That's the Jim Mitchell that I know and love. There you go.
Popping a wheelie.
There.
So it will tickle your prostate to know that appropriately enough setting I'm in right now is in the middle of a torrential downpour. Sky is black and lightning is hitting the ground within a half mile of me. I'm looking at it. So the setting is appropriate. So
absolutely. Just great to talk to you, man. You're always a blast to catch up with, as people can see right off the bat. Just wanted to talk a little bit about your career in the pro wrestling business, and I even want to talk about what you do now, because I think that's it's amazing. But when I started doing some research for this interview, I didn't realize. Correct me, I'm not sure if this is right, because the internet is right about half of the time. But did you actually train and started to wrestle, or were you always a manager?
No, I never formally trained to be a wrestler as far as like under the tutelage of a school. I had tried to get into wrestling starting around 1986. And, there was no way to break in. But I was living in Columbia, South Carolina at the time, and Moolah, the fabulous Moolah, had a wrestling school about 4 miles away from where I live, which I stumbled upon by accident in the Yellow Pages. Went over there, tried to get in, and back then the cost for wrestling school was like $3,000, which is a lot of money now, but if you do the inflation, I don't know what the hell $3,000 would be the equivalent of now. But there was no way I could do it. So I had just started sending really bad homemade basement tapes, I guess you would call it, of me standing in the kitchen and cutting promos, and to promoters if I could find one, which was the other thing. I used to have to go to the library and look on microfilm.
Oh my God! Imagine that. I've done that too.
Yeah, I forget even how you would reference wrestling or what you went through to find it. But I would find these tapes of microfilm and just sit there, and I'd eventually find the address for Don Owen in Portland and stuff like that. And then I would send all these tapes out or cold call people. And basically they'd say, okay, you're a manager. Who'd you work for? Well, nobody. Click. And that was the end of it. And,
so you're the one who didn't lie, because almost every interview we do, there's a point in which somebody said, "Oh, who'd you work for?" and then they lie their ass off. So you're the one who told the truth.
Yes, and this will explain what you read about me getting trained, because I did eventually lie. But I'll tell you how that happened. So after having the door shut in my face repeatedly, and I had met a couple of job guys at a bar that I used to sing at, and they told me, look, they get thousands of VHS tapes a week. You know, how the hell are they going to know who you are? So you've got to know somebody.
Right.
And I knew the job guys couldn't get me they weren't going to take a recommendation from a job guy, one of Lula's jobber group. So I took a commercially produced porn tape. Like, this was back when if you bought a VHS tape, this was like 1989, maybe 88, 89. Those things cost like $80 or $90, right? So I guess I
never bought this Jew ass ain't buying no $89 porn tape. I don't care how good it is. But
I was a more desperate Jew than you.
I guess.
So, anyway, it was called White Bun Busters, and it was just the filthiest thing you could ever imagine. By these guys, their gimmick was the Dark Brothers, whatever. But they were universally known as gonzo porn people, right? So I bought this tape, then I chewed up a piece of paper and stuck it where the recording tab would be. That's always empty in a commercial VHS tape.
Right.
Like a a movie or something. I stuck it in there, and I waited about 10 minutes into the movie, knowing that it was so disgusting. If they didn't cut it off, they were going to keep watching it. And as they're in the middle of the porno, or the beginning 10 minutes or so, suddenly I popped on screen as the Reverend Jimmy Ray Snake Handler, pastor of the Church of Wrestling Unification and owner of Love Brokers Enterprises, the world's largest outcall modeling service or escort service, and the producers of Love Brokers Video Enterprises that brought you Nasty Old Codgers, the Yuletide erotic classic, Yes Vagina, There Is a Santa Claus. So it's like this 20-minute long filthy promo, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, you know?
Sure.
And I'm just going on and on with all this shit. But the person I sent it to who called me back eventually was Gene Anderson from Jim Crockett Promotions. And
poor Gene. I love Gene. He was such a great guy.
Yeah, I was at work at I was working at a record store at the time when such things existed in the mall. And I get a phone call, and this girl says, Gene Anderson's on the phone for you. And I'm not even making the connection. And sure enough, Jimmy, Gene Anderson, Jim Crockett. I almost fainted. And, the guy said, look, you're a good talker. You'd make a good preacher or a porn star, but you don't know anything about wrestling,
Sure.
And he gave me a few numbers, one of which was Avalanche Buzz Tyler, who got the tape and said, who was running an indie in Sumter, South Carolina. He told me the same thing. Basically, we can't.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, so what are you waiting for? Hurry to SaveWithConrad.com.
Use you because you're so green we don't, the guys basically, I think Gene told me the guys will fuck you up. You've got to learn how to take your bumps. But between the two of them, I got some phone numbers and started fishing, starting with the world's worst shitty outlaw shows, which they now call indie or independent shows, but back then they were called outlaw shows.
Right.
And slowly just kind of kissed my ass and worked my way up. So that's how I broke in.
But you were, just to be clear, you're a wrestler though, not a manager.
Right. What I was going to say, how the lie started was once Gene Anderson had talked to me and he told me, call Nelson Royal and Grizzly Smith or some other local TV that was running around in North Carolina. I think it was called Atlantic Coast Wrestling. He said, call them and tell them I said I sent you.
There you go.
So that turned into the lie of Gene Anderson trained me. Gene Anderson didn't train me for shit. I mean, I went to his camp a couple of times with some jabronis that I eventually got in with.
Right.
And, Gene Anderson, if you know anything about him, his training camps where he would just beat the living shit out of people and blow them up before they ever got in the ring. And essentially, wrestling tryouts were just money grabs.
Sure.
They really weren't there to find talent. So my friends went in there and paid Gene money, and whoever, I think he was working with Nelson Royal at the time, too. I forget exactly. It was in Monroe, North Carolina, I believe. But so I'm going up to Gene, and I'm going, hey, can I get in there and do this and that? And Gene said, kid, you got the gift of gab. Don't wait. No, you're not. You don't have to do this,
Right.
So anyhow, that's how there's a thing online that says I was trained by Gene Anderson, which is funny, that a lie that I don't believe I ever said in public once the internet took off.
Right.
That was just locker room talk from the outlaw days. It somehow made it to Wikipedia or wherever that's posted. So, go on.
I didn't see that you were trained by Gene Anderson in my research, but I was surprised that you were a wrestler. So how did you get in? I thought for sure the whole porn tape thing was going to come down to that. You got a call from Jim Cornette, and that's how you got in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, just because I know Jim Cornette. But Gene Anderson was totally not expected, but just as entertaining. So how did you eventually work your way into to Smoky Mountain?
There's a guy named Greg Price, who some of your listeners may know as a guy who runs the Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Fan Fest,
sure,
or was running it for several years up until recently. He was one of 2 or 3 promoters in the area I lived in, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, that circuit for the indie guys, who ran good independent shows where you'd have, Ivan Koloff and Wahoo, or, whoever just got off TV on top.
Right.
So, and I had always tried to get on his shows and just couldn't get in there. Now, I don't remember if I sent him the porn tape or not, but he sent me a fax. He was running South Atlantic Pro Wrestling, which was one of the last territories. It was something I think Robert Fuller and John Ringley and Paul Jones had started in the Mid-Atlantic, the same area that Crockett had run.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. That's actually the promotion where Ken Shamrock and Jerry Saggs of the Nasty Boys had their physical confrontation. That was the promotion, and Ken Shamrock was known as Vince Torelli. That's also where Rob Van Dam, I think, showed up for the first time. Yes, sir.
But he called me up to do a TV for him, and I think we taped a month worth of TV or something like that, and then they went out of business. But the good thing was that I had a reel, as they say in Hollywood, right? Sure. And then I had to toil on the indies for a little while after they shut down, but Cornette got a hold of it. Cornette called me, this is probably a year or 2 later, and then brought me to Smoky Mountain, where I was always called Daryl Van Horn at that time, but he brought me in, and I managed Prince Karras, the 3,000-year-old mummy, which was kind of, it was what it was, but it gave me a great platform to get out on TV and just say the most preposterous bullshit you could ever imagine, because Cornette had told me, look, the Mummy gimmick is already dead. His money backer, Rick Rubin, the big record producer,
Right.
record label owner, whatever, he was the backer, and he wanted a Mummy in his promotion. So, Cornette's not going to manage a Mummy. He's managing the tag champions or whatever. So I guess I was the guy who seemed crazy enough to walk on television and say manage a Mummy. So I went there, and that's where I first started getting recognized. And again, there really was no internet to speak of. This is like 1993, 94 or so. And so when all was said and done, I think I had about a 9-month or 8-month run there, and got booted from there. But in the interim, I met Chris Kanyon, who through the Wrestling Observer Pin Pal section or something like that.
Geez, wow.
Who happened? He happened to live like 2 miles away from me, and I didn't know it. And I met him, and I pulled out my South Atlantic Pro Wrestling reel. This guy had a great job. He's making a lot of money as a physical therapist, and they paid for all of his housing, a car allowance, everything. So he had nothing but money to spend and time to waste. So I kind of took him under my wing and took him to Moolah's for a little while, and I got him in on Smoky Mountain. And as one thing led to another, once he left, he got a job working way underneath as a jobber in WCW. And when the time came for the whole Blood Runs Cold thing with Glacier and Mortis and Wrath and Ernest Miller, I wound up getting the call to be James Vandenberg, the manager of the Collection of Oddities. So it's one of those things where it's like, remember the people you meet on your way up, and you'll meet them on the way down, et cetera, et cetera. I scratched his back, he scratched mine. So that's how I got to work the turn.
Sure. Kind of ironic, though, that just to go back a little bit, that your entry into Smoky Mountain Wrestling was because, and don't take this the wrong way, but the way I see it is Jim Cornette was too embarrassed to manage the guy the character he probably hated the most, but his money backer insisted on. So he hired another manager to come in underneath, and so the fact that Jim Cornette is so particular about the professional wrestling, which continues to this day, really gave you a break. Hey, I read something online about that your tenure with Smoky Mountain came to an end over a drunk dialing incident. Could that be right?
You may remember this from back in the day. There was a thing where the Dirt Sheet guys were beating up on Cornette for various things, and Jimmy being Jimmy. There was an incident or something where he beat up a former employee's car with a baseball bat. There was all this kind of shit going on, and suddenly he was getting the equivalent of #MeToo, in the sheets, and so. And I think they were starting to have some money woes. But anyhow, Paul Heyman, of all people, called me because he was on my stupid list of phone numbers I'd acquired over a couple of years. And we'd talk every once in a while. He called me and he said, "Hey, is it true Smoky Mountain's going out of business and Cornette's wife left him?" So I went, "I don't know." And then I proceeded to get shit-faced drunk and talk to all my friends about it. And then I decided to call a couple of his office people. The first office person, Casey O'Connor, who's actually the guy whose car he smashed up with a baseball bat or something, I think. But told me, basically, mind your own business. And then as I continued to stress out, because this was, as far as I knew, the only in I had to pro wrestling,
Sure.
Then I called Cornette's personal assistant, who then must have passed it on to him, and he called me back about an hour later. "Hey, Daryl Van Horn, Jim Cornette." I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And how the promos he cuts on Vince Russo?
Yep.
He cut one on me.
Yep.
that was the end of my Smoky Mountain tenure.
Have you guys talked since then? I'm assuming you have, and cleared the air.
Oh, of course, absolutely. He didn't even remember it. He thought it's about something else.
Right.
But because God, that was almost 25 years ago or something like that. We've talked about it and laughed about it, and he came to work for TNA, which I'd not seen him in years, And yeah, we're buddies. Always good. I just saw him a couple weeks ago at a wrestling convention down here in Orlando. But yeah, Cornette's a buddy of mine and great inspiration.
Yeah.
And yeah, everything's good.
He's been a guest on this podcast, and we're still waiting for him to come back and do part 2. So Jimmy Cornette, if you happen to be listening, anytime, give me a call. But
Right.
yeah, he's a ton of fun. Got some buzz last week when I mentioned the great deal that MyBookie is offering to City Ringside listeners. Yes, I said it, and I'm going to say it again. They will match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $1,000. They've been in business for years, have great reviews online, and their mobile site is easy to use. I would only recommend a service to my listeners that's been good to me, and I love MyBookie. They have great in-game live betting, the most rewarding player perks in the business. And for you fantasy guys out there like me and fantasy gals, you can even bet the over-under on how many fantasy points a player will score each game. Never been able to do that before, but you could do it on MyBookie. The over-under in fantasy points for particular players, that, to me, sounds like a blast. That's why I'm urging you to make your way to MyBookie. You win, they pay. And as I said, join now and MyBookie will match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $1,000. Use promo code Ringside to activate the offer. Visit MyBookie online today. That is MyBookie. Don't forget to use the promo code Ringside when creating your account to claim the bonus. You play, you win, you get paid, and get up to $1,000 matched on your first deposit dollar for dollar with the promo code Ringside. Visit MyBookie now. You went into WCW, the Blood Runs Cold thing, and it seemed like it didn't last. Was there? I guess my question is: was there ever a longer term storyline for your character and that feud in WCW? Did it get cut short, or was that just the storyline, and then they were always planning on moving Canyon against Raven and Glacier going in another direction?
Well, you were there for a few years before me, I believe. The day that Bischoff hired me, because the NWO had just popped like 6 months earlier.
Right.
That was like late '96, right? And like in the summer of '96, the NWO started. So everything completely changed, Right. But they had been running at about the same time that happened. 6 months of commercials. These mysterious commercials for Blood Runs Cold for Glacier, if you remember. But when I went into CNN Tower to sign my contract with Bischoff, he said, this angle is already dead. I'm going to sign you up for 2 years. Don't buy a house. Don't get married. This thing is already dead because we're moving in a different direction. So, which was a hell of a way to sign your first contract. But I have to say this, we were middle of the card,
right?
Middle of the card, top middle of the card, whatever. But we had great production values,
Right.
We had all that gimmickry and the lights and the crazy characters. So, it was a hell of a spot, and this is when we were kicking Vince's ass every Monday night for whatever, a year and a half. And Vince McMahon's ass in the ratings. So it was a great featured spot. But there was by the time they got the Blood Runs Cold thing on TV and running, actually, with the wrestlers, it was a complete afterthought, I know I jumped in and tried to, because they had no rhyme or reason for why people were fighting over Glacier's helmet. They didn't know what a Mortis or a Wrath was, nor did they care. So I tried to bring it a little bit more down to reality because I don't know if they were supposed to be aliens from another planet. I don't know. Nobody ever said. So I just talked about them being like blood sport, Malaysian pit fighters and from Taipei and all that kind of stuff. And I remember a funny thing. Bobby Heenan, who was really cool. Anybody
of course
worth a shit will tell you Bobby Heenan was great. He did a great job because they did, I did like 1 or 2 promos, but basically we weren't important. They didn't let us talk. And when our matches aired, like pretty much anyone underneath, they would just talk about the NWO angle because that's what was selling tickets. But Heenan would always jump in and put my weirdo shit over. So he got my character over, actually like a manager would get a wrestler over.
Right.
And to this day, people still come up to me and say, did you really try to buy the elephant man's bones from Michael Jackson and stuff like that? So anyhow, the first night or whatever, a pay-per-view or two in, Bobby walked up to me and said, hey, what do you want me to say about you or describe these guys? Probably the first night. I said, well, yeah, because this was when UFC had just started. They'd done one or two pay-per-views. And, you know, it wasn't like it is now. It was just a free-for-all tough man contest.
They actually
banned. It was getting banned.
Yeah, go ahead.
They were getting banned in states. You know, it was like the big hashtag before hashtags. And they were calling it human cockfighting. And I said, well, Bobby, why don't you say that we're human cockfighters? And Bobby says, Vandenberg, I can't say that. You're going to think there's two guys standing there with their fucking dicks out having a sword fight. But,
God bless him.
You know, it was a great experience because, you know, I had to unlearn all of the shit that I had learned on the indies, you know, which is wrong. It's just like anybody who comes off the independent circuit now and goes to WWE relearns.
Right.
You know, and I was actually thrown on TV before, and you know, the first few months I was there, I did a lot of stupid stuff on screen that I eventually kind of moved out of. But it was a great learning experience, and it was great to be there on the #1 rated cable TV in America at the time. You know, it wasn't working on top, but it was. I mean, hell, you couldn't pick a better time to be in any kind of position in the wrestling business than the Monday Night Wars. I mean, think about it. The guys who drove the truck and put the ring up were making good money, you know, and they were pulling racks, you know. So we were all rock stars, were we not? I mean, I don't know how long you've been married now, Dave.
26 years.
Okay, well then that doesn't apply to you. Never mind.
No, it doesn't apply to me. But
it does not.
But there was plenty of pulling for those who wanted to pull. That's for sure. And you were always in on, and you were always in on the action. You're not married, are you?
Yes, when everyone else was doing GHB and ecstasy or whatever they were doing, I liked my beer and my women of questionable virtue. That was my vice.
It's funny, you know, going back to what you said. It's you know, there's a lot of discussion these days about WCW, what went wrong. You know, there's this podcast, there's other podcasts. Eric has a podcast. There's a new book out. So it's ironic to hear that Eric had known that the angle was dead from before he even aired it. I'm assuming that's because they were going to go into a comic book cartoon kind of hero direction. And then when the NWO, which was way more realistic, got hot, they realized that they couldn't do both. I'm assuming. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. And here's the thing. Now, at the time, we were frustrated. Like, you know, I mean, who in the wrestling business isn't frustrated because they think they should have a bigger push, right? But we were frustrated and griping and grumbling and bitching and thinking that people, you know, that Kevin Sullivan and people like that actually gave 2 seconds of their day thinking about us, you know, conspiratorial thinking, which I now know is all bullshit in retrospect. But yeah, the irony is that his vision was to have these over-the-top video game kind of characters, right? And then he put the axe on it. But the funny thing is that video games then took off huge, and now you actually have all these goofy indie promotions that have characters like that, you know, that are doing pretty well, you know, whether that's your vision of wrestling or not. But he was a bit of he saw the future. He implemented it about 20 years too soon, you know, but or implemented it and then killed it before it came to maturity.
A little bit of an innovator.
But yeah, there was supposed to be all, you know, merchandising. The whole thing was about merchandising the kid.
Right.
So it was supposed to be a big deal, you know. And then they're like, hey, it's probably a lot easier to sell a black and white T-shirt that says NWO on it than producing, you know, pit fighting play sets or something. I don't know.
You're a fun guy, and the interview's been fun. But I want to get serious for a second because I don't know that anybody knew Chris Kanyon as well as you did. And when the history when what happened in his life, first coming out as being gay, and then which nobody, I don't, you could say more than but I don't know of one person that in WCW that would have given a crap. But and then him unfortunately battling mental illness. I guess after that all happened, it came out that you were sort of the guy who talked him down, so to speak, when he would be in those situations. So tell me a little bit about that, because he was such a great guy, such a great talent. I mean, he gave so many guys their starts in WCW and in the business. So I just think it'd be we need to take a minute just to pay a little tribute to him and talk about him in a serious way, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, again, I mean, for the most part, I owe everything to him for opening the door for me. I mean, we were good buddies, period, before he was in WCW. And right before he moved away from Columbia, South Carolina, he announced to me that he was gay. Well, now look, in South Carolina, which was way behind the times, the only homosexuals I'd ever, interacted with were kind of over the top, effeminate, caricatures almost.
Right.
So and you know how Canyon was. He's from Sunnyside, Queens. Fuck that motherfucker. I'll kick your ass.
Yeah.
So, and I remember he'd have girls at his house all the time in South Carolina, and they would say, "I think your friend is gay." No, he's not gay, but that was because he was the only guy not getting laid when he was having all these parties, and they all wanted him because he was the big muscle guy, know. So he told me he was gay. I completely forgot it. He would call me while he was starting to make his trek. He went through Memphis, he went to ECW before he got to Atlanta, and he would call me, and I'd give him updates on what was going on with the Rats, and he'd always say, "You stupid motherfucker, I'm a homo," right? So we get to WCW, and he let me, crash on his couch for the first month or whatever until I got a couple checks in. But that was when I started noticing that despite all of his being Lady Bountiful, no pun intended, but I mean, very generous guy, know. I started noticing that he had, I called them anger issues.
Right.
He would later go on to reveal to me that the reason he would go insane and beat the shit out of me when no one was around was because I was the only person who really knew him and knew his secret identity. I was the only person he could be comfortable with. So while I was on the road with him, he also used me for what they call a beard in the gay community, which means a cover for you to be straight. But he would use me to basically, one of my jobs was the minister of propaganda, and we'd come back to catering after a night out, and I'd done whatever I did, and I would just include Canyon in the lie, right? I'd fill him in on what happened, and he would interject with, "Yeah, and Vandenberg was so nasty," whatever, But he, and one of the things, so when he went to New York, that's when everything kind of switched for him because he wasn't in a comfortable environment. And that's when I started really seeing that he was starting to, deal with the mental illness was starting to get on top of it.
Right.
And it got to a point around 2006 or so where he started calling me constantly and threatening suicide. And, the first 5 or 6 times it was, "Oh my God, and you're trying to call his brother and, everything. And please don't do this. Everybody loves you." And then he got to where he would call me and tell me that he was doing things like that as a work, to create controversy. But he had this idea. One thing he said in his last years of his life, and I think he was getting desperate and looking for a cash grab. I don't mean to disparage my dear, dear friend, but he started saying that people were discriminating against him for being gay. And I told him, I said, "I don't think that's the case. I don't think anybody gives a shit." But he got it in his head, and, he started dealing with schizophrenia and bipolar issues and whatnot. And the last time You know, he'd drop off the face of the earth for a while,
Right.
and then he would call me. And sometimes, like one day, he would call me, and it would be like Old Canyon, totally mellow. And a few nights later, he'd call me, and it would sound like he was on cocaine, which he wasn't because he did drugs to my nature, but he was having a manic episode.
Right.
So the last time I saw him, I was doing an indie show for Mikey Whipwreck, and it just broke my heart. I mean, I hate to kill my character here, but we had a, you know, he came up with some weird idea of how to do Mortis on the indies that completely flopped, and I won't bore you with the specifics, but everybody in the locker room knew that he was just on a manic binge, out of his mind. And I talked to him after the show, and he started telling me, you know, he wanted to kill himself again, and I was going through the same pitch that I'd give him every time he would hang up on me. And he said, look, you're being selfish, you know, you're too worried about how you're going to feel if I die. How about how the fuck I feel?
Right.
You know, how about, you know, and I mean, and I cried the whole way home on the flight that next day. But I talked to him one or two more times after that. I don't think it was more than a few months. And then I got a call from his brother. No, his friend passed, who you may or may not have met. Basically, his brother from another mother kind of guy. And I got the news, and it was horrifying because even when he finally came out as being gay, it was like 10 years too late. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal, and nobody cared. And I think he thought that was going to make him a big deal. And he had started just doing all, you know, making an ass out of himself. Again, no disrespect to my dearly departed friend, but he, you know, he was out of his mind and approaching Stephanie and Hunter and Vince with crazy ideas and showing up at shows unannounced and making a nuisance of himself. And it was just really sad. And the thing was, I don't think that he, you know, I can't be inside of him, but I don't think he realized that nobody gave a shit.
No, and that's
you know?
the thing. You know, I remember he built up, we did a pay-per-view in Orlando with Jimmy Hart, and he built up this big announcement, you know, this huge announcement. And, you know, when he finally said he was gay, it was like, people were like let down. They were like, that's it. We don't care. Nobody cares. I mean, I'm not going to say nobody cares, but very few people care. And these days in the world we live in now, really very, 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 very few people care about that. You know, my kids have,
well, you know, I'm sorry, your kids have what?
They went to high school, and you know, gay couples go to prom, and you know, hey, they go with the other guys, or I mean, it's not a big deal. That, you know, if I were to tell my kids such and such is gay, they'd be like, so what? I mean, it absolutely means nothing.
Yeah, and you know, the only reason he told me he was gay was because when he was moving, his cousins from New York had come down to help him move or something. And or maybe it happened when he got to New York. Maybe he'd already gotten back to New York. But his cousins were helping him move, and some gay porno fell out. And he said, "That's Errol Van Horns. He's a sick motherfucker." And that's exactly why he called me. He said, "Look, I'm bisexual." And I said, "You mean bisexual like Elton John and Boy George said they were bisexual because it's not cool to be gay, or because you're gay?" And he goes, "The second one." But so he had me call his cousin to tell his cousin that I had accidentally left some materials at his house. You know what I mean? He gave me a whole script on how to try to swerve his cousins into thinking that I was gay and that he was covering for me, you know? And I didn't care. I mean, so, you know, I did it. And, you know, he probably told people I was gay back and forth, whatever, over the years. I don't know. But everything was a deflection. But it was really kind of sad, you know, thinking back on it, that his big thing was he always wanted a boyfriend, but he didn't like sissies or effeminate men, and he could never find a guy that was just a guy, you know, a macho New York guy. But, you know, I miss him horribly. I mean, I think his talent is greatly missed by the wrestling world. And he would have been a great hand in these days, like the WWE Performance Center, as a teacher and whatnot. He was a great guy.
I was gonna,
touched a lot of people.
I was gonna say before you said that. In my mind, I was thinking the exact same thing. That if he would have just been comfortable with who he was, he'd have been the lead trainer at the WWE Performance Center right now. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, and then like he wrote this his biography that came out after he was dead, and he had sent a copy of it to me or something like a year or two before it ever came out, and I told him this is a pack of lies, and he said that he didn't care. He wasn't writing for a wrestling audience. He actually had it in his mind, Dave, that he was writing it for the Oprah Winfrey Book Club audience, and he thought that his life would be turned into a movie or a sitcom. So a lot of the things in that book are complete horseshit. Like he was basically describing me as like his crazy Kramer friend from Seinfeld type of thing. And there are complete discussions in there that they're nonsense, but they were because he thought, okay, this guy plays this role. This is this nutty, wacky friend. You know what I mean? Like he had Seinfeld or something in his head. And I wish somebody would come along and write an actual book that really reflects, you know, what he was going through, because to me that's more potent than the nonsense that he left as sort of his unofficial autobiographical movie script treatment, you know, that nobody ever bought. But yeah, there's a hell of a story on him. I mean, the things he went through, and after he had died, that's when all that, you know, the cultural awareness and it gets better movement and all that stuff came out. He could have really done a lot in that kind of environment, you know? So,
well, everybody's
the Dolly Downer portion.
Yeah, everybody's writing a book. I wanted to hit on it because I know that you guys were very tight, and he was a great guy, and I just wish he could have been comfortable within his own skin. But there's a lot of people writing books right now because it's very easy. It's not like the old days where you have to print a minimum of 30,000 books. You know, so let's hope. I think that's a great idea. So I'm going to try to find somebody, reach out to some people who might want to, you know, do a book on Chris and his life and do it justice. I think that would be a fitting end to what was kind of a crazy life. If you're tired of looking at your cell phone bill, paying for a lot of data that you do not use, I got the best mobile you've never heard of to tell you about. Ting Mobile. Ting does mobile service differently. You only pay for what you use. There are no startup fees, no contracts, no plans. Perfect if you spend most of your time around Wi-Fi. Why pay for data you don't use? The average Ting bill is just $23 per phone per month, as we've discussed before. Nationwide LTE coverage means you'll have great network coverage from coast to coast, and almost any phone will work with Ting. From that ancient Motorola Razr to the latest Galaxy S9 or iPhone 10. They have reliable customer service. You get to talk to an actual human when calling in. There are no machines. I love that. Get $25 off your bill or $25 off a new phone in the Ting shop at ringside.ting.com. That's ringside.ting.com. Speaking of crazy, you ended up going to ECW as the Sinister Minister. How was that compared to WCW?
It was the Wild West as portrayed in the movies. You know, did you ever see the movie The Wolf of Wall Street?
I have.
Okay, the opening scene in The Wolf of Wall Street, I put the DVD in and I said, oh my God. It's the opening scene, if you know what I'm talking about,
right,
with Leonardo DiCaprio. I said, oh shit, that's ECW. That's it was a bunch of outlaws and misfits, and that's actually it was just that's the first time I started feeling like a somebody, kind of,
right,
you know, instead of I'm faking it, it's going to fall apart any minute now. A great atmosphere, and you know, Paulie was the world's best motivator. And I was there like the last year and a half. I think they were open.
Right.
But it was, God, I mean, that was actually the funnest time in terms of just, I can't wait to get up and go to work. You know?
That's awesome.
It was just an amazing atmosphere. And that, I planted the seeds to do what I did later down the road, by becoming more of a devilish character. So it was a very special time and a place to be in the wrestling business.
So you ended up at TNA, and I know you had a brief run early, and then you came back with Abyss. Would I be wrong to say that was the perfect matchup, you and Abyss?
Yes, that was. I'd come in earlier with Slash and Brian Lee,
right.
the Disciples of the New Church, whatever. And we had a great run with America's Most Wanted, with good stuff. But when they hooked me up with Abyss, that was one of those. It really was. It was a peanut butter and jelly Reese's cup, chocolate and peanut butter, whatever.
Sure.
Keith Richards and Mick Jagger type of thing. And we had a good run.
Wait, who's Keith Richards? Who's Keith? I don't mean to interrupt you, but which one is Keith Richards and which one is Mick Jagger? I got to know.
I was probably Jagger.
I figured.
But yeah, we had a great run, and it was basically the best run I ever had of sustained main event or right under the we were always in either the top spot or right under the top. And TNA at the time, before everything screwed up due to things that we don't have time to go into now, they were never going to be number one, but they could be a solid number two, and they had a great fan base. You were working there when I was there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually was on a podcast recently, and somebody asked me about that, and I said I never really got the feeling that they were going to be able to take on the WWE machine, but I thought that they, could be doing what they were doing successfully for a long time.
Like Bill Behrens used to say, I forget which one in the 70s or whatever, when there was Avis and Hertz rental cars.
Right.
I forget which one was number one. I think it was Hertz was number one. So you could never be Hertz, but you could be a really good Avis rental car. A solid alternative.
So you had all kinds of twists and turns, soap opera stuff with you and Abyss, and it ended with the kind of a reveal that had been kind of planted out there for a while that he was your son, and then nothing happened after that. So I'm curious. I'm curious what happened there, because that you'd think that reveal would have been the start of something, and it really was kind of the end. Did you know it was the end? Was that the plan?
Well, I knew when they started having me come out on TV before they split us up. I remember the first time Vince Russo came up to me and said, "You're going to walk down the aisle with him, grabbing him by the hair." And I'm thinking, look, I'm me, and this guy's a monster.
Right.
What in the hell am I yanking this guy around by his hair and treating him like a bitch? Like a pimp treating a whore,
Right.
And I knew the writing was on the wall that something was going on. And there were aspects of it I didn't like. There was all this I've always believed that any story that's told in wrestling should be seen on screen, not the ghost in the machine type of finished bad movies, so that it's revealed that something nobody saw, that I was shot in the back or whatever. And they flip-flopped that a couple times. But I went with it, and my thing was, okay, I'm actually on, like working in Maine. I'm working with Sting. I'm working with Christian. I'm working with Kurt Angle. I'm getting all this promo time. I can either bitch and whine about it, or I could just dig my heels in and do my best with it.
Right.
So that's what I did. And as crazy as that story got, some of the best promos I ever did were when I was taking this convoluted story and making sense out of it. So when they finally revealed that I was his father and he had shot me in the back, they brought in Ricky Banderas as Judas Macias. And Ricky Banderas was kind of like the Hulk Hogan of Mexico, or Stone Cold of Mexico. And he now works as Mil Muertes for Lucha Underground. But he was a big star in Mexico. He came in, but I think like he got started and he hurt his back, and then he was off TV for a while as soon as they started it. Then they kind of put me with like Gold Dust or Seven, or what did they call him? Not Gold Dust.
Seven, I think. Seven.
Not Seven. No, that's what they called him in WCW. Silver or something. I can't remember. But it was Gold Dust, basically. Black Rain. That's what
Black Rain.
And yeah, so they they kind of treaded water for a little while until Ricky came back. And then they offered him a contract, and whatever, I guess they didn't get together on the contract. And once he was, and then he left. But then the money shot of all this is, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm pretty much arguably doing the best damn promos on the TV show. Why am I not on TV? I get fired. Terry Taylor lets me go. And like 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years later, 6 years later, I was doing a podcast with Vince Russo, and I was going to do like the old 60 Minutes pop a question on your gimmick.
Right.
On Mike Wallace. Hey, by the way, what's this? And I asked him why I got fired, thinking that he would go, and he said, no, Dixie wanted you gone because you were getting booed, and people were booing you, and you were getting real heat, and because people were booing and hissing at you, that must mean they don't like you and you're not a good person and you shouldn't be working for her company. I'm like, what in the hell is that? You know, it was too many years later to do anything about it. But I would think some of the subsequent creative decisions that you saw that came after my release would kind of indicate that, and this is about the time she started pulling more strings creatively. But, had I known that, I would have come to them and said, okay, you want me to change something or whatever? Frankly, I would have talked to her and said, Dixie, you realize it's my job to get booed? It's my job for people to give me the finger. It's my job for people to be angry, which most people aren't doing now because they're cutting flips in the ring and all kind of being generic. I'm an actual old school heel, but I never got the chance to do it. That's how the ball bounces. So,
I have to say,
although
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I did have the pleasure of getting a little closure on the TNA run. Last year, I came back last year for Slammiversary.
In the history of doing this podcast, we've done it for over a year. I don't know that I've ever been speechless. What you just told me about why you were fired, if Russo's being honest, and, sometimes, I don't know, you never know with Vince Russo, but if he's being honest, that just left me speechless. It's a good thing you continue with the story because my jaw was on the floor for about a minute and a half. So
let me interrupt you 1 minute with that, because right after I got fired, Dixie called me and talked to me for like 10 or 15 minutes, telling me how wonderful I was and what an asset I was. And I figured, okay, well, that's what everybody does. That's your make sure the guy doesn't hand himself, right? And then like a week or two later, she called me back and did it again. So and Dixie had never been anything but, she's a little scared of me, but had never been anything but polite, charming, and all the same thing everybody says about her. But, if you'd asked me in private, I would have said she's a wonderful, nice lady. She just doesn't understand wrestling. So I had no idea. I was like, surely Dixie's not mad at me. But then I also heard from Terry Taylor, because I called back even after that. Before Russo told me that. I had called and looked, for a job as an agent or something backstage.
Right.
And he told me Dixie was mad because when she fired me or something, which actually like 3 times my contract would run out and they would have to pay me a big balloon payment.
Right.
And she was pissed off about it. I remember his quote to me was, are you going to get me heat with Dixie or something like that? What are you talking about? And he explained the thing about how they had to pay me all that money. He said, that's not your fault. And I was like, how in the world, how is that my fault? But again, that's years ago, so 10 years ago, so hell with it. But yeah, it just, so I would have first thought it wasn't Dixie, but then when I heard that, it kind of put a light bulb on in my head about the and yeah.
All you could do is shake your head, and that's why we do this podcast, because of stories like this. Hey, you had mentioned it. You'd started to mention it. I was going to ask you. You had a cameo at Slammiversary in what I was there. It wasn't by any means a 5-star match or anything close to it, or 4-star. It was. I don't even know that it was a match more than a presentation, but I thought it was one of the most fun things I'd ever seen in my life. And you got to make a cameo at Slammiversary. Shark Boy made a cameo playing off his Twitter feud with Josh and JB. You know, Abyss came back because of you, and then JB did the dive into the thumbtacks. And so tell me, was that like a nice exclamation point at the end of the sentence, kind of wrapping it all up? Because it was fun. I had
yeah, and I actually came back like in March for a little bit too, for a couple of shows. But yeah, when I went there and I was thinking, I mean, look, I looked different. I had shaved my head by then, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, and I really want it to be a bow on the end of my career because nobody hires managers.
Sure.
So I was really trepidatious before the thing aired because this was like one of those, what do you call it? The Broken Hardy match or the whatever. There's a name for that style of Lucha Underground kind of, but that's what that match was with Steiner and Josh Matthews and Borash and Abyss. And so I'm watching. We had pre-taped the thing where I walked up to Abyss to hand him the mask, and they did a good job filming it. Like you could see the red boots. The guy said, "Let's start with the boots and pan up slowly." But I was like, these people aren't going to know who I am. And so people were actually, they did the deal where they went, you know, off out of the studio so they could air the pre-taped, you know, shenanigans in the pool and all that. And when the spot came up, I'm standing there waiting on people to say, who the hell is this guy? And when it came up and they saw the red boots and it started panning up, the fucking place went insane.
Popped. Huge.
I mean,
huge.
It was like brought me to tears. I was like, holy
That's awesome.
shit, they remember me. And it, according to some people, it's the biggest pop of the night.
It was up there. It was up there.
regardless-
That and Shark Boy was the two probably, and JB doing the dive, the off the top rope into the thumbtacks were probably the three biggest pop of the night.
But it was, you know, it was such a silly match. But the funny thing is when you read, because I was thinking, okay, everybody's gonna bury this thing. Even most of the most harsh critics said this was a clusterfuck, but my God, it was entertaining.
Oh.
And you had these great cameos, you know, Shark Boy doing his silly shit in the pool and the Jaws music, and then the devil shows up. So I would have considered that, you know, when I got done with it, I figured that's it. That's how I get closure on this thing.
Sure.
And they called me in to do a little thing with Grado several months later. And then I did a thing, we filmed it at the beginning of the year, but it aired in March where basically it was a passing of the torch to the new monster. And I went out there and, you know, I said, okay, I guess what I'm doing is, you know, I can't bury myself. I got to put myself over. But obviously you're building, Congo Kong and Jimmy Jacobs as the new people. So, you know, I went out there and did that. And because it took so many months before it aired, I was wondering, man, this thing stank. Did it not work? Because you're in that Impact audience, you know, where the crowd's burned out after so many hours of TV taping. But the response I got back from that, the hits they got on YouTube, beat the shit out of anything they were pushing at the time, like by double and triple. So it was really gratifying. I don't know if I'll be back, but still, and it was kind of, I don't know how much wrestling the business is going to do, but it, you know, he and I had gotten sideways for a few years, and it was really nice to reunite. And if I don't do anything else with wrestling, period, or with him or whatever, there was a sense of closure on that chapter of my life that I didn't get from years ago, where I was just inexplicably dropped. So it was a real lot of fun to be there. And of course, the atmosphere is completely different back there now that you have Don Callis and Scott DeBoer backstage, and everybody seems to be happy and not walking on edge. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I'll never forget, I was at a resort. I think it was a timeshare, one of those timeshare gimmicks in Orlando with my family. This had to be a dozen years ago. And it was time, you know, they do all these different activities, and it was time for karaoke. And I was out by the pool, and they started the karaoke, and I hear a guy singing, you know, to start it off, and had a good voice. And I look up, and dressed exactly like your wrestling gimmick with the eyebrows curled up and the same flashy outfits was Jim Mitchell singing karaoke, and I don't know if you remember this, but I went over and gave you a big hug.
I do.
And
it was a moment out of a movie because you looked at me, I looked at you because you had some gimmick you were running there at the resort as well, some sort of vendor thing you were doing, or I forget what you were doing.
Airbrush tattoos, yeah.
Like yeah. And I was like, you looked at me, I looked at you like, what in the hell? What are you doing here? Yeah. You know? And basically you said, hey, this is great hustle. And I was like, yeah, I'm making $2,000 a week doing this. This is great hustle, you know? So,
and you're still doing it, correct?
Yeah. Look, what I'd always feared anytime I lost a wrestling job was, how do I ever go back to punching a clock?
Right.
Because you can't, you know?
Right.
Then you get into that whole Mickey Rourke kind of thing in the movie, you know?
Sure.
But thankfully, I was able, right after ECW folded, in fact, I owe Canyon this, he wanted me to do it, and I argued with him for a while, and he bought me about $10,000 worth of equipment. He said, I want you to do this. I go out and get drunk with you and do it for fun. You'd be great. Cut promos. And I just went out and started cutting wrestling promos and pitching the bar like I'm pitching tickets to the Omni, you know, in the 70s, like Dusty Rhodes or something. And it worked out really well. And so, yeah, that's what I do. I still occasionally I will do indie wrestling shots here and there when they're available. Again, nobody really wants to pay for a manager. When you find the ones who do, a big gig. Yeah. I worked earlier in the year for a company called Atomic Wrestling based out of Cocoa that has a great roster of talent, and it really was running good independent shows. And I did it like once a month, which was enough to keep the bug. It's like methadone for wrestling or something. So you don't get sick and go through withdrawals. And I'm doing the convention circuit or whatever you call it, the autograph signings,
sure.
WrestleFest kind of things. Speaking of which, before you get me out of here, I need to do a couple of plugs.
Okay, sure.
All right. On Saturday, October the 13th, at the Ramada Inn in Monroe, New Jersey, I will be working for K&S Promotions Legends of the Ring, K&S Promotions WrestleFest Legends of the Ring, Saturday, October 13th, Ramada in Monroe, New Jersey, and we will be debuting a new set of limited edition trading cards, sports cards called Superstars of the Squared Circle. I am one of the people. I'm honored to be in the trading card set, along with, I believe it's Gary Hart, Tony Atlas, Chris Adams, and a couple more that escape my mind at the moment. But again, that is Saturday, October 13th, Legends of the Ring WrestleFest in Monroe, New Jersey. You can go to KSWrestleFest, one word, .weebly, WEEBLY.com for more information or to pre-order tickets. And then on Saturday, November 24th, I will be at WrestleCade. You know WrestleCade, right?
I was there a couple of years ago, yes, sir.
Yeah. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a huge show every year, reuniting with Mikey Whipwreck, where I'll be signing autographs, doing meet and greets, and that sort of thing. And again, that's Saturday, November 24th, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, WrestleCade. And anybody who would like to get a hold of me for any other reason or purchase 8x10 glossy photos, anything of that nature, and I hope this works, I'm on Facebook, and according to what I read, the actual address, if you look it up, is james.mitchell.731@facebook.com. So that's
or they could just go to Facebook and put James Mitchell in the search button, and when they see your iconic face, they'll on there, they'll know that it's you. But
well, yeah, you've got to find the bald one though, because there are fake ones. There are several fake ones.
Oh my God, I didn't know.
Tell me, yeah, but they've got old pictures of me when I had hair. If you see me and I look like Ming the Merciless, that's the right one.
Hey, that's actually like a compliment. You know, you've gotten somewhere in life when people spend the time to set up fake Facebook accounts of you.
Yeah, the world has changed, isn't it, Dave? It's a weird place to live.
We could have a whole nother hour conversation on that has nothing to do with professional wrestling. And hey, it might be fun down the road, actually. But yeah, so glad you got the plugs in. So hey, thank you so much. I know that you did your best to make sure that the storm didn't hamper the quality of the sound, and it was great to get your story, to hear some of your stories, and just one last question. I'm always curious about, to this day, how many of a percentage of people, when you go do karaoke, remember you as being in the wrestling business?
I don't get as many as when I was on TV, national TV every week, but I still probably get, I don't know, 15 or 20 a week. It takes them a minute before they recognize it, and then they flip out,
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's it's a gig where I'm still cutting promos, which is why I don't.
Which is why you just cut that great promo about K&S WrestleFest and WrestleK. Yeah, you come from the old Jimmy Hart. Always wear your gimmick. Always dress up like your gimmick. Thought process, and I know Jimmy still wears the Hart jacket, and you still wear the exact same thing, and other than the bald head, look exactly the same. Hey, great talking to you. Hopefully we could catch up down the road. Love to have a cocktail, and thank you for your time. And don't forget K&S WrestleFest and WrestleCade. Both of those I've been at, and both of those are extremely well put together if you're looking for a fun and well organized wrestling convention in your area. Thanks, Jim.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on, Dave. You've always been one of my favorite people, going way back to the WCW days. You're a sterling individual, a lot of fun. And thank you so much for having me on. And guys, may all your stains be large ones. See ya.
And with that, Jim Mitchell, ladies and gentlemen. My thanks to Jim for a fun hour or so of chatting about his career and his life, and I actually really think that we need to find somebody to write an accurate biography of Chris Kanyon, as Jim mentioned, and he'd be the one to go to get the information, him, DDP, and so many others. So if anybody has any interest in doing that, you don't even have to give me credit. Just do right by my friend Chris Kanyon. God bless him. We're going to be here next week, as always, with another exciting guest for you talking professional wrestling. So, as always, be sure to follow me at David Penzer on Twitter or at Penzer Ringside. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Until then, my name is David Penzer. I'm still sitting ringside.
Follow David Penzer on Twitter at David Penzer. Also, make sure to follow the show on Twitter at Penzer Ringside. You've been sitting ringside with David Penzer on Radio Influence.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.